So a lot of students get stuck and overwhelmed when it comes to planning for a particular career in art. Even the students that have a clear goal in mind, often enough they're going about it entirely the wrong way. I know I did, and I know I see it every week. Hello, I'm Tyler Edlin, and today with my 12 years of experience as an illustrator and then as a concept artist, I'm going to hopefully do my best to break down the key differences between the two, how a lot of the skill sets are actually interchangeable. We're going to look at a lot of the work that you're probably going to need to get your foot in the door with some of the bigger studios, and we'll look at some of the student examples from my last term on how they're making the transition as well from illustrators to concept artists. So let's go. Now, this creative field is hard to plan for because it's hard to get into, because it's not like your typical careers out there. Normally, right, if you're trying to train to be like a doctor or a lawyer, heck, even like an electrician, typically, right, you can study A, you take test B, and right, you can become C. It's very formulaic in how you're going to progress. With the arts and entertainment, no path is the same, and my path was all over the place at times, and in a way it still is. And so usually either from my patrons in the Discord or the one-on-one mentorship, I hear very often, you know, should I do illustration? Should I do concept art? And the most common one I get is, you know, why am I not being hired for concept art right now? And then I look at their work, and then it turns out they have at best 10 to 12 average illustrations, and it's like, there's a different feel, bro. And we're gonna get into that in a moment here. I answered this very question, you know, just 3 times last week alone. Like, one particular student, for example, wanted to get into fantasy concept art, specifically character design, and they just wanted to do character concept design for the fantasy genre, right? So that's very kind of a very specific niche, and there are some artists out there, you know, working professionals that do. Another student basically wanted to just work on character design just for kind of, you know, more real projects. The example they gave was for something like Uncharted. So, right, so again, a very specific sort of sector of that. And then there's another one that wanted to do character art, but they were pretty much had a whole body of work that just kind of focused on illustration. And so it's easy to start to kind of tangle like different goals, you know, because they're going to derive different outcomes, which would dictate what you would want to train. Of course, with concept art and illustration, the fundamentals pretty much can carry you through to both courses. So, you know, needless to say, like, the fundamentals need to be there. Basic, you know, drawing skills, perspective skills, composition skills, color, light, and materials, right? Being able to paint or render, all that stuff could get you potentially down either lane, right? Like, there's enough of that overlap. But, like, you'd want to showcase specific things for each sort of portfolio. And so, again, that's another one of the students was like, I'm getting ready, I'm prepping my work, I want to start applying to places for you know, this upcoming June. Realistically, for a lot of students, when you think you're ready, you're not quite ready. But also at the same time, we're never going to be 100% as ready as we want, and we do have to start that. I do remember, like, from, you know, back in the day, it was very challenging, kind of, you know, treading through those waters in terms of, like, you know, getting work but not really feeling confident or confidence about that. But that's how I started. I just produced enough work that kind of was more illustration focused. I thought at the start illustration was going to be the way for me. It's more of what I knew. It's more of what I was kind of trained to do at school, you know, back at college. So it felt like the more clear path for me. I did like video game art, but I didn't know the difference. You know, and mostly, like, you know, illustration is narrative based. It's to make pretty pictures. You can use it you can use concepts in illustration, right, to kind of sell ideas. Often enough, in game development in the earlier stages, we got to produce enough art to help sell and pitch ideas to non-artists, right? Whether they're at like corporate kind of board meetings, whether we're trying to get something greenlit, that requires prettier illustrations, right? That's some of like the more glamorous types of art you probably would see on ArtStation. Not what actual concept art is, which is more of like diagram. It's more of like visual problem solving. That kind of just fits into the production pipeline, and where it's like we draw and design, come up with different ideas, loads of iterations, turnarounds, those sort of things. Those get sent to the next person, usually like someone on the 3D team, right? And they'll start building an asset based off your drawing or your diagram. Sometimes, of course, it can be full color as well. But the two very much have some distinct differences. But yeah, I found out early in my career, like back in 2010, 2011, that illustration and illustration work, the workload, what I could get paid for it with my current skill sets and my connections was going to, for me personally, it was the more challenging path, for sure. For one, like there typically is not, from what I know, not a lot of in-house studio gigs just for illustration. There is exceptions to that. There's positions at like Wizards of the Coast and stuff like that where it's not all just freelancers. Maybe a big studio like a Blizzard, or part of like maybe like a sub studio of Activision might have enough illustration work that they might have like one or two maybe on staff that just does illustration, marketing, promo work, things like that. But for the most part, I think if you're doing illustration work for like 90% of people out there, it's going to be freelance and through the freelance sort of lane. And that's something a lot of students, like I did, had a misconception of, is that like I was expecting a full-time job in a studio, being able to make pretty pictures with like all the characters and stuff. I did that. I thought I was going to do that for years. And that's why I recommend to students is like, if you want to go for concept art, if you want to do game art, then we're gonna have to start kind of casting a wider net, and your body of work should showcase that. So of course, right, if all of us are working on our fundamentals and you can do all the basics, even though we might not like, environments, or we might not like characters, essentially, like, we can fill in a portfolio with some of the other stuff because we technically should be able to, right? Because we have the fundamentals, and the fundamentals will carry us through. So what I had to do, earlier in my career was that I was a bit more of a generalist. Think of like a video game, right? Like Elden Ring and some of the Dark Souls stuff, right? Like you start off as a very unspecialized character, and you just kind of allocate stats and you build a focus toward one direction. By the end of the game, you're a big hulking warrior, or you're a master sorcerer, right? Because you've dedicated time and focus into one particular thing. And so, like, again, I trained as an illustrator, so I could paint, I could draw, I could render stuff, and then I started doing concept stuff, and my concept stuff was like very wide, right? I had a couple props, I had loads of characters, and I did character work regularly up till 2015. And then, of course, I did my environments that I'm probably more known for now. And so what basically I had to do is just, get experience, build up clientele, build a name for myself in this field long enough that, like, okay, like I can decide, like I do nowadays, I don't want to do character work anymore. If I do character work, I want to do it just for me. So kind of, if I started with that mindset though, and see, this is the difference, I would have had a very challenging time getting that work, getting that experience, building up connections, right? If I'm just like, oh, I'm just gonna do fantasy environment art, that kind of looks like Zelda. If I had that mindset and focus at the start, I think my path would have been longer and it would have been a lot more challenging. So often enough, what I have to do to, like all the students I talked about, today, the ones I was meeting with last week. It's like, I recommend that, like, because honestly, doing character work is one of the most competitive areas or subgenres of concept art in particular. There's just far fewer needs of that specifically on a lot of projects. And so like the people that do it are very good at it. And of course, if you're looking to break into there, realistically, you're competing, right, with all of those guys. Who knows how much more experience they actually have on a lot of us. So what I usually like to recommend to people, again, going back in as a slightly bit more of a generalist, or at least kind of cast a wider net with your portfolio. So rather than limiting yourself to just fantasy character art or just sort of sci-fi or realism, have a little bit of all those. Because it's not too hard to kind of branch into that. Yeah, you might not ideally like the subject or the genre, but you can curate to that as you get more experience and start filtering it out, or, take less and less of those sort of jobs, right? So you'll have, fantasy art, then have a little bit of sci-fi, get into the period, historical sort of work with that as well. And then the next little thing you could add in there that's a slight bit of a segue that will broaden your horizons quite a bit is having some creature or monster design. It's not all that different from doing any kind of typical sort of character. So then you'll have a whole other area or subgenre into your portfolio. And then the last thing a lot of you guys could add that are kind of looking to break into character art specifically is to do some props. Right? So like characters need props, characters interact with props, and props are fundamentally like something that's probably like the most in need sort of aspect of projects. For games specifically, there's just so many little objects and things to interact with the player, scattered throughout the world, and that all needs to get designed by someone. So whether, as you can see here, there's some more examples here up on page, like you could have like weapons, you could have stuff for the environment itself, like foliage here, or you could kind of space that out and have like a little bit larger of things. But some of these props are really kind of real world based, so they're kind of mundane in actually what they are. But like, again, if you can find a way at least to make even the most mundane thing slightly like entertaining or add some kind of value to that, so it shows you have a competency in basic stuff, that is a great place to be in. So if you actually look at this chart here, right, and begin to understand what the actual structure of this field looks like, you could see how it could up your chances of particularly getting into a studio or starting to get more client work exponentially, right? Because you will have a junior artist at the entry level at the bottom. The most work you guys can see from my examples here is this sort of production work. It's problem solving work. It's busy work, essentially, because your role is that of an assist one to the rest of the production team. So if you just go in with key character art designs in your portfolio, they're going to give that to the concept artist, the senior concept artist, maybe even the art leads, not the new hire. New hire is not going to be designing any of those characters, right? So set yourself up, right? Set yourself up for success and have a broad spectrum of concept designs to fill out that, your portfolio there. So, right, as you get 3 to 5 years experience, you can move up the ranks to become more of like a concept art, and they do everything. And you could probably more right with 3 to 5 years of experience, you could start maybe just doing a little bit more of the characters. Maybe not be the hero character, but there's lots of NPCs, there's lots of shopkeepers, right, in games, lots of secondary elements for you to design in a game as a regular kind of concept artist. Loads of creatures. I mean, look at Elden Ring, loads of baddies in a game like that. Tons of work in that sort of field. And then, you work your way up by like, right, 7 to 10 years, you're senior on the team. Now you're doing the main art leads, you're doing all the big hero pieces, and that really just changes everything. And you'll have a body of work that builds up to that, and basically you'll be off to that career. Eventually, of course, you have the managerial roles at the top, but that's not for anybody anyway. And if you have a bit of an entrepreneur in yourself like me, you'll just want to start your own studio and break into your own work and hire people to do art as well, or you continue up that studio chain. There's a lot of work out there,
but you got to kind of know where to start. And again, 10 years ago, I had no idea where to start. So I just kind of wrung my way up that ladder. And I don't think that's too uncommon, for a lot of us. I can't speak for anybody else, of course, but that's a very conventional sort of path. So to get into a studio to begin with, right? You see on a lot of the applications. I know you guys see this. They're looking for 3 to 5 years of experience, all this stuff. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true. If you have a good body of work, it's gonna sell itself and you regardless. But because a lot of people rarely just go from zero experience into a studio position, that's where you can actually start your freelancing, right? Because if a lot of you need to make, some kind of money, wage, and income before you can do that all on your own independently with art, you're gonna work like I did, day jobs. I worked as a bus driver. I worked in a factory. Worked with my family's business. I did that for years and just did the side hustle of doing the occasional client work until, right, I did that long enough that I had enough work that a studio was willing to take a chance on me, and I got on a full contract work basically from there. And again, that's another reason why I wanted to shift to game art, particularly because the contracts in general last a lot longer in period or duration, right? Whereas like where you're doing still freelance with illustration, it's just like a cover there or like 4 character images here and there, right? They're very quick, usually done within a month. But with a lot of game contract art and development art like that, right, they get you on for 2 months, 6 months at a time, and they'll just keep renewing it. That's what I'm doing now. Epic Games renews my contract, hopefully right every 6 months. But it's great because now I don't have to worry about any other kind of income unless I want to add on top of that, because it's good enough, right? And I know I'll have at least a pretty good paycheck for a while. But I do have to say there are plenty of really successful illustrators out there that do make it on that merit alone. But it is, in my opinion, quite a hustle. Like my buddy Jake Murray, he does magic art, he does art for Fantasy Flight, he sells prints, has an online shop. He might do some tutorials on the side. Probably goes to conventions, sells some stuff. I know it's pretty typical for like a lot of illustrators doing that sort of thing. You have to have like your own kind of product line. You could sell originals. There is a way to do it. It's just a different sort of path. But right with those fundamental skills, of course, you can basically go back and forth too. So if you are looking to break into the concept art field, I definitely recommend, fill your portfolio with, objects and props. If you're going to characters, don't put yourself in necessarily such a corner where you're only doing one genre. Like if you don't want to do environments, don't do environments. There's lots of things you can do besides of environments. And likewise, if you want to do environments, you can go to that gray area of doing lots of props and design and layouts as well, and that opens up your doors as well on that side. It's just kind of trying to find the entertainment value out of like the most mundane things and actually show that you can draw and iterate on them, because that's what so much of the entry-level jobs really do consist of. So even though a lot of us have the urge to jump out there and create the most pretty badass looking picture that we can, because we think that's mostly what concept art is, in reality it really isn't, at least most of the time. But you could have a side hustle of like doing those as illustrations. So do you see, like, there's lots of overlap, there's lots of opportunity. You just have to have a little bit of strategic thinking when trying to, when deciding who you're sending what work to try to get what job, and like how you present yourself as well. But I've been talking about this stuff long enough, and I want to show you guys a very specific example of kind of all of this into play with one of my current students, Anna, right now.
Alright guys, so see, this is Anna's work. I had nothing to do to contribute to any of these, unfortunately. This is how, she came to me, right? A very kind of classically set up illustration portfolio, right? She has all the good stuff. She has multi-figure action shots, right? Really good. Figurative stuff. She has interiors, artificial lighting, lots of good. This is like a textbook good definition of an illustration portfolio. if you ask me. Absolutely stunning stuff. So of course I have to say to her, like, what could I possibly help you with? These look stunning, right? Absolutely stunning. She's like, well, I want to do more concept work and design work, and I have no idea, where to start. So I'm like, all right, let's figure out a project, and we'll develop it over the next 8 sessions that we have together, and let's see where that takes us, because I don't have to show you any kind of fundamentals. We don't have to talk so much about color and light. Let's just brainstorm some ideas, and that's what we did. Over many sessions, she started developing, the look and feel of this little world. So this is, pretty good concept art, right? She's not taking them to full illustration level. They're not polished or rendered, but the drawing's good. The idea is solid. She's got some giant armadillo riders in this very kind of hostile and primitive environment. Basically started fleshing out an entire world for them, kind of coming up with the idea that these folks kind of live off in these cliffs. So we had to come up with like design languages to kind of figure out the architectural language that these folks kind of utilize, what their everyday life might be like, what they trade, what they sell, what the climate conditions are like, what the inside of their homes may or may not look like, what sort of things goes on, in there, what do they decorate it with. So, I mean, this is what we spent our time doing, really just kind of fleshing things out. So now she's building an additional portfolio, right? And this is what I've been talking about all video, about how to like bridge that gap, right? Using these interchangeable fundamental skills. And it's very doable. I did do it for quite a number of years. And then she could put a lot of that to test, right, with developing like really cool fleshed out color scenes. And she's been doing that, a ton of work, a workaholic in the middle of a move. Nonetheless, she's doing great stuff, right? All the way down to the smaller kind of props, and we're working on page layouts now. It's some of this is still work in progress, right? That's my disclaimer, of course. But yeah, every good idea has to start somewhere, and it's totally cool, right, to start with things rough. But if you're into concept design and you want to do some world building, it's a great way to start, right? You really just start to come up with a idea, and eventually have the work itself be consistent with your main body of work, or consistent even within itself. So right, every drawing and design she has here very consistently developed. So like if I saw all of this in a portfolio, I could be pretty confident that I know what I would get from her. And I think that's a good staple attribute to have in any kind of concept art portfolio, just so we know, like, okay, this is how she thinks, this is what the process looks like, and now we can see through all the work she put in, right, how she's building up this really robust world and setting. So guys, if you have any questions at all about what we talked about here today, or if you have a story about how your journey's going, I absolutely want to hear from you guys. And of course, if you do want to see some more of this, I'm going to have some links below, and we'll talk more about portfolios and getting yourself prepared for the industry. I'll catch you guys next time. Take it easy.